Welcome back to Chris Brooks, the channel where we break down the most complex military and geopolitical events in the world, not with noise, but with the depth and clarity that actually helps you understand what's really going on. Today, we're going underground, literally, and the further we dig into this story, the more extraordinary it gets. So settle in. Iran was hiding a massive secret, not in plain sight, not in some government building, buried under mounds of soil and reinforced concrete, engineered to be completely invisible to the outside world. And for a while, the plan almost worked. But the United States found it, and once uncovered, the U.S. didn't hesitate. They unleashed the most powerful bunker-busting bombs in their entire arsenal. Concrete was turned to butter. Nothing survived. Once again, the B-2 stealth bombers shredded Iran's defenses as though they simply didn't exist. So how do we know all of this? 3 holes. That's what analysts have been able to identify at Iran's Talagan 2 facility, captured in satellite photographs released by Vantor. But these aren't ordinary holes. As the War Zone, TWZ, points out, these are massive, and they look like a trio of large impact points that almost certainly point to the United States deploying its largest and most devastating bunker-busting munitions at a site with direct, documented ties to Iran's nuclear program. We'll be getting to the specific weapon in a few moments, and trust me, the details are jaw-dropping. But what these photographs tell us about the evolution of U.S. strategy is arguably the most important part of this entire story. The 3 holes are visible across the top of the Talagan 2 facility. And not coincidentally, not even remotely coincidentally, they sit directly above the hardened underground structure. The exact location where Iran was conducting its most classified, most sensitive projects. The kind of projects Iran has gone to extraordinary lengths to hide from the international community. And Iran wasn't sitting around hoping nobody would notice. It was actively fortifying Talagan 2, reinforcing it, burying it deeper. Construction reportedly began in October, when Iran International reported that rebuilding had started at a site Israel had previously devastated. That work had actually begun before the 12-day war sparked by Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025, though Iran was eventually forced to pause when its nuclear sites were struck by the very same types of bunker busters the U.S. would go on to use here again. At the time, a report from the Institute for Science and International Security, ISIS, noted, "The purpose of the new construction at this location cannot be discerned from the imagery. A multitude of other non-nuclear purposes are also possible." But it followed that with a critical warning. It is deeply concerning that construction is occurring at a former AMAD planned nuclear weapons development site, raising considerable questions as to the true purpose of the facilities there. A former nuclear weapons development site, being rebuilt, underground, in secret. And Iran expected the world to look the other way. So what was actually being built? Early construction involved massive covers placed over destroyed buildings, groundworks and foundations for a bunker, and a new arch-roofed structure with smaller buildings going up nearby. Over time, it became far more ambitious. Iran encased the entire Talagan 2 site in hardened concrete, then buried it under a massive layer of soil designed to dampen the impact of any bombs dropped on the facility. Iran was engineering a layered protective system, a physical shock absorber built around its most sensitive underground bunker. As that main facility was being constructed, the smaller surrounding buildings likely served a very specific purpose, functioning as entrances and exits into the bunker network below. From orbit, it might look like an unremarkable cluster of buildings, but underneath, Iran was constructing something it considered absolutely critical to protect. Iran's fundamental problem, the one it had no real solution to, was that all of this was being watched. Satellites don't take days off. Every truckload of concrete, every new foundation, Every shift in the landscape, captured from orbit, analyzed, catalogued. The US and Israel knew exactly what they were dealing with from the moment construction began. All they needed was the right weapon and the right moment. And that brings me to the first question I want to put to you. If Iran knew its facilities were being continuously monitored by satellites throughout the entire construction process, why did it press on anyway? Was it desperation? Confidence that the bunker design would be enough? Or something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely read through them, and this is exactly the kind of question where the discussion gets really interesting. Now, Iran wasn't naive about what was coming. Taliban II had already been struck before. In October 2024, Israel launched a strike against the site, causing major damage, according to ISIS. That same institute has documented that Taliban II was likely being used to manufacture high-purity PETN plastic explosives, a critical component in the construction of shockwave generators. Those generators, also called distributors, were likely being built as part of Iran's effort to miniaturize its nuclear weapons designs. The facility is believed to have been constructed as part of the Ahmad Plan, Iran's covert nuclear weapons development program. Let that sink in. Miniaturized nuclear weapons. Smaller, more compact nuclear devices that can be fitted onto ballistic missiles and deployed with far more flexibility than conventional large nuclear bombs. A country that successfully miniaturizes nuclear weapons fundamentally changes the regional and potentially global balance of power. So when the US destroyed Taliban II, it wasn't neutralizing some abstract military target. It was taking out a facility with direct historical ties to one of Iran's most dangerous nuclear ambitions. And given that Iran rebuilt it, the US almost certainly had intelligence suggesting the new Taliban II was being rebuilt for precisely the same purpose. It doesn't matter now. It's gone. Destroyed for the second time. ISIS analyzed the satellite photographs, and the picture of damage they reveal is remarkable. 3 holes ran across the length of a facility that served as a suspected high-explosive test chamber. Those holes confirm that the US bunker busters broke through, smashed clean through, the massive concrete casing Iran spent months constructing. The bombs penetrated, then detonated deep inside the Taliban II facility itself. Supporting evidence comes from the satellite imagery showing the protective defensive wall on the outside of the facility's northern entrance. That wall suffered heavy damage consistent with an outward blast, meaning the explosion happened underground, inside the bunker, and the force pushed back out through the facility, breaking through the external defensive wall from the inside. Another building southeast of the main facility was also partially destroyed, likely from the concussion effect of the main bunker blasts rippling through the earth. Every piece of that evidence tells the same story. Precise, deep, and utterly destructive. The bombs went exactly where they were designed to go. Now, the weapon. Because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. The bomb almost certainly used here is the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP. Its designation is the GBU-57/B, and it is the only currently viable candidate for producing this specific pattern of damage. As TWZ notes, everything about the satellite imagery, the size and shape of the impact points, the penetration depth, the structural damage pattern, is entirely consistent with MOP usage. This isn't speculation without precedent. Those same characteristics appeared at Fordow and Natanz following Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025. We know for a verified fact the US used MOPs there, 12 on Fordow and 2 on Natanz. The same signature at Taliban II essentially draws its own conclusion. And here's my second question for you, and I really want you to think about this one. Given what you now know about the MOP, the penetration depth, the enclosed detonation, the way it's engineered for exactly this kind of target. Do you think Iran ever had a realistic chance of defending against it? Or was the destruction of Taliban-2 inevitable the moment the U.S. made the call to strike? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know where you land on this. Before going deeper into the MOP, it's worth briefly addressing the other candidate, the GBU-43B, better known as the mother of all bombs, or MOAB. The MOAB was the most powerful non-nuclear weapon the U.S. had before the MOP arrived. It's a 21,000-pound bomb built in just 9 weeks for Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, typically launched from a C-130 Hercules aircraft. Its warhead carries 18,700 pounds of explosive, combining TNT, aluminum, and cyclotrimethylene trinitramine, an enormous surface-level blast. But it wasn't right for Taliban-2. The reason is simple: delivery. The MOAB has to be dropped from a non-stealthy aircraft. A C-130 shows up on radar. It's slow. Sending one into Iranian airspace would put the aircraft and crew at enormous risk. By March 12th, approximately 80% of Iran's air defenses had reportedly been degraded. But that still leaves 20% of scattered systems that could engage what is essentially a slow cargo plane on a bombing run. The U.S. had no reason to accept that risk. It had something far better available: the MOP, delivered by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Silent, invisible, already past Iran's radar before anyone knew it was coming. What makes the MOP genuinely different from every other bomb starts with its fundamental design philosophy. As Army Recognition has noted, this weapon was developed with one singular purpose: destroying fortified and deeply buried underground targets. It was developed following post-2003 military assessments, which tells us the U.S. identified the limitations of what it had and built something purpose-engineered for an era where adversaries hide their most dangerous programs underground. The MOP penetrates through kinetic force. It's aerodynamically designed to maintain structural integrity on impact, with a specially hardened casing that drives it through reinforced concrete, while a delayed internal detonation mechanism ensures it doesn't explode until it has reached its intended depth. It can push through up to 60 meters, roughly 200 feet, of hardened concrete before detonating. That is the depth Iran would have needed to reach to stop this weapon. Based on the satellite imagery of Taliban-2's construction, it clearly didn't get there. The warhead carries between 4,590 and 5,732 pounds of explosive material, less than the MOAB's 18,700 pounds. But that comparison completely misses the point. The MOAB detonates on the surface, dispersing energy outward. The MOP detonates underground, inside an enclosed space. And an enclosed underground detonation amplifies destructive effect dramatically. The energy has nowhere to go. It channels through every corridor, every chamber, every tunnel. The walls become weapons. On paper, the MOP's warhead looks smaller. In practice, underground, it is absolutely devastating. Add 200 feet of penetration to that enclosed detonation, and you have a weapon Iran had no answer for. One interesting detail: the MOP strikes at Taliban-2 differed from those at Fordow during Operation Midnight Hammer. At Fordow in 2025, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Dan Kane confirmed the U.S. specifically targeted ventilation shafts, dropping MOPs through those openings to maximize penetration depth. He also revealed Iran had tried to seal those shafts with concrete to prevent exactly that. It didn't work. But at Taliban-2, the impact holes show a direct overhead strike. Why? Most likely because Taliban-2 had a different design. No deep ventilation shafts to target. Or possibly because Iran's protective layer simply wasn't thick enough to demand anything more surgical. If the covering can't stop the MOP regardless, there's no need for a more complex approach. The U.S. hit it directly because it could. And the U.S. wasn't alone. What followed the initial MOP strikes was a coordinated follow-up designed to ensure Taliban-2 wasn't just disabled, but completely erased. The IDF claimed it struck the Taliban-2 facility overnight on March 11th. The IDF doesn't have MOPs, only the U.S. does. But it does have 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs, and with the main underground structure already destroyed and the impact holes already punched through, IDF aircraft simply needed to fly over and drop ordnance into the damage already created. ISIS reported on March 12th that fire control and instrument buildings to the west of the adjacent Taliban-1 facility had also been destroyed. These were too far from the main blast for concussion damage alone to explain it, meaning IDF fighter jets specifically targeted and eliminated the surrounding support infrastructure after the main bunker was already gone. In a single night, Taliban-2 went from Iran's most carefully protected secret facility to a field of rubble and craters. Now zoom out and consider what that actually means. Iran spent nearly a full year rebuilding and reinforcing Taliban-2 after Israel's October 2024 strikes. It poured hardened concrete. It buried the site under soil. It built protective walls. It invested enormous resources, financial, material, human, into hardening this one site. All of it rendered completely, utterly useless in a single night by bombs dropped from an aircraft Iran couldn't even see. The B-2 and its MOPs didn't just destroy a building. They destroyed the idea that Iran can meaningfully protect anything underground from the United States. They dismantled the assumption that reinforced concrete and layers of soil constitute a credible strategic deterrent. And Iran now has to ask, what comes next? That is not a rhetorical question. Because Taliban-2 is not the only hardened site Iran has been working on. Reuters has reported similar fortification efforts at Parchin and Isfahan. Tunnels being buried, entrances being reinforced, all continuing up to at least February 18. All of it captured by satellite. And here's the devastating irony. Every bit of that construction work has done nothing except create a detailed, up-to-date target list for U.S. strike planners. Iran, in trying to protect its facilities, has essentially handed over its own target map with the most critical sites already highlighted. Iran might be hoping the U.S. runs out of MOPs. But a February 12th report by Air and Space Forces revealed the Pentagon had already finalized a deal with Boeing, worth more than $100 million, to restock its MOP supply ahead of Operation Epic Fury. At approximately $4 million per bomb, that deal alone represents at least 25 new MOPs, on top of whatever remains in the existing stockpile. The U.S. has used 14 MOPs across both operations. The resupply is already locked in. The arsenal is not running dry. The delivery platform isn't going anywhere either. B-2 bombers were en route to United Kingdom bases as early as March 4th, following the UK's reversal on restricting U.S. access to those airfields. B-2s are being maintained, restocked, and refueled from positions uncomfortably close to Iran. The U.S. could launch another wave of strikes at any moment, and Iran wouldn't know until it was already over. That is the entire point of the stealth bomber. President Trump has publicly referenced a big wave coming following B-2 repositioning to UK bases. What form that takes remains to be seen. But the directional intent is not ambiguous. Iran's response has ranged from defiant to unconvincing. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard continues issuing threats and conducting what amount to minor, glancing counterstrikes against U.S. and Israeli assets. Gestures that, given the scale of what's been thrown at Iran, feel more like reflexive posturing than serious strategic action. Iran's political leadership is clearly searching for an exit ramp, though it appears to fundamentally misread how much leverage it actually holds right now. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian posted on March 11 outlining the regime's demands. The only way to end this war, ignited by the Zionist regime and the U.S., is recognizing Iran's legitimate rights, payment of reparations, and firm international guarantees against future aggression. Those are the demands of a country that believes it's negotiating from a position of strength. Iran is not. 3 craters at Talagan 2 make that reality unmistakably clear. And with more MOPs on order, more B-2s in position, and a documented track record of penetrating Iran's most hardened underground facilities, the United States has demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that no level of fortification Iran can build will change the fundamental equation. That is the reality Tehran is now being forced to confront, not as an abstract warning, but in the form of 3 massive holes punched through what was supposed to be its most protected secret facility. If you've made it this far, then you already know what Chris Brooks is about. Going past the surface-level headlines and into the detail that actually helps you understand what's happening and why it matters. If that's the kind of content you want to keep getting, taking a second to hit the subscribe button is the best way to make sure you never miss the next one. It genuinely makes a difference to this channel, and I appreciate every single person who's part of this community. And before you go, I want to leave you with this. Iran knew Talagan 2 was being watched. It knew the site had already been struck once. And it rebuilt anyway. Poured more concrete, buried it deeper, invested even more. What does that tell us about how Tehran is actually making strategic decisions right now? Defiance? Miscalculation? A belief that the U.S. will eventually lose the political will to continue? Drop your read on it in the comments below. And stay with Chris Brooks, because this story is far from over.